I'd like to call to order our April 18th board workshop on our 5-year master facilities and rezoning plan for 2026 to 2027. Before I ask for the motion to approve the agenda, I just want to make sure, Ms. Huddle, can you hear us? I know you're virtual, so you can hear and see?
I can.
All right, I hear you too. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Mr. Hogan?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Ms. Snipes seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All in favor? And I see Ms. Huddle. That motion carries 6-0. I'd like to welcome everyone here. We have some folks watching us today and participating in our workshop. Today we're going to be talking about potential bond referendum projects and estimates, rezoning maps, procurement plans, and priority of construction projects and referendum questions. And this is a workshop for all of us to kind of get information and ask questions. So I appreciate everyone for being here. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Ross and his team under our discussion agenda, starting with number 4, the potential bond referendum projects and estimates. Dr. Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board and our community. We're going to go over our potential referendum projects and estimates, and during the presentation we'll have different members of the admin who will present on different projects and as well as the rezoning map. So we'll go through that presentation and continue to eat as we go through. You can stop us at any time if you have questions. We have a great school district driven by that vision that we love and grow our students. And so the question is, with all that's going well in our school district, why change? And we held a community forum. That community forum was held a week ago at 6 o'clock, April the 11th, for our community. And we're going to be showing some of the results of the questions that we asked during that presentation. But our answer to that question of why change was our community is changing, and we must prepare today for that future. We are currently one school district operating 25 campuses, spanning about 3.8 million square feet of space amongst those campuses. And so we asked those who were in attendance, in which area of the school district 5 community do you live? And just to get a sense of who was on, and again, we had about 249 total participants, but they were on and off during the presentation. So you'll see the percent of the responses as well as the number of responses. But just give you an idea of who on the virtual community forum was in attendance from Chapin, Dutch Fork, Irmo, and out of the district. And so we began to go over the administration's recommendation for the financing the fix and fill plan and what that fix and fill plan entailed. We started out by outlining the challenges that we face, given the conditions of the buildings in Dutch Fork and Irmo area, talking about the school student enrollment and capacity issues that we see in the Chapin area, and then also talking about the need to modernize our instructional programs and our workforce development. We outlined, trustees, all of our projects. We broke them into 3 different categories so that the community could help organize all of the things that we were discussing. These categories are campus improvement projects, instructional and workforce development projects, and rezoning related projects. I would like to go over these in that order. So I'll start out with the campus improvement projects. Again, we talked about and explained the need for security upgrades. That includes cameras and secure vestibules at all schools. Our board is undertaking secure vestibule work. We have won a grant from the State Department of Education, but this is to make sure that we have that in every one of our schools. We also outlined the facilities condition assessment, talking about the 3.8 million or 3.73 million square feet that we have, the work that was done by MPS to identify the 11,137 incidences that we have shared. But we also made note that that's not a static number or static situation, that we currently average about 29 maintenance work orders per day that we're trying to work on. So it's a continual problem that we see. But we shared that when we composite all of the issues that we see within our campuses, where the high need areas are on that those two-rated facilities. So the two-rated facilities are prioritized according to the MPS needs to receive repair through the referendum. We also outlined the need to enclose the walls at Harbison West and Nursery Road Elementary Schools. As you can see, when these buildings were built without classroom walls or self-contained areas for students. And so it creates a very difficult learning environment. We've seen recently with COVID that one issue could knock out an entire grade in terms of when it came to the notion of safety and health issues. And so the goal would be to enclose the classroom walls at Harbison West and Nursery Road, similar to the floor plans that we see at Chapin Elementary and Lee Park Elementary, which have also were open concept and then had their walls closed. We discussed the district office or administrative building. As we see, there will be changes in this area, and our goal was to create a new district office, but a professional development center building, a part of this building, to facilitate the needs of the district in training our staff. And so we show conceptuals of what that would look like on the current property of the central office. And last, we talked about the multi-purpose pavilion. I would say that in the beginning, when we first talked about this, we were considering what was called a climate control facility. After speaking with our athletic directors as well as the athletic training staff, felt that a better facility or a better service for us would be a multi-purpose pavilion. So I've invited Mr. Stephen Puckett, who's our coordinator of athletics, visual and performing arts and physical education. He is also joined by athletic directors from Irmo High School, Paul Calvert, from Dutch Fork High School, Mac Harvey, and from Chapin High School, Ronnie Wessinger, to give us a brief, a little bit more information on the pavilion, its uses, and its needs. So, Mr. Puckett.
First of all, I'd like to recognize the priority that our board and our district leadership has placed on supporting athletic programming in our district. One recent area, an example of this, is with our athletic training program. We've recently was voted and approved to kind of change some of the programming and the structure of that. And I get the opportunity, honestly, to go around to meetings, represent our state in the area and state meetings concerning athletics. And I can tell you without a doubt that Lexridge 5 has an impeccable reputation when it comes to athletics. We are always looked at, and when I go to these meetings, kind of feel odd because everybody's always pointing at me and talking about how we try to do things with excellence. And one regard of that is with our athletic training program, because we're trying to be innovative, we're trying to do what's right for our kids. And I just want to say thank you, because that's just an example of how the support that you offer us, and it doesn't go unnoticed. I'd also like to say thank you for allowing us to, as Dr. Ross mentioned, an opportunity to discuss an ever-increasing topic of interest in the world of athletics and extracurricular activities in general, and that would be heat illness, subsequent heat illness prevention, and the process of heat acclimatization. The heart of this brief and any initiative that would come from related to it, it's clear, it's all about student safety. For the purpose of this presentation, Coach Harvey is going to come talk to us in a little more detail in just a second. We'll use football as the example due to the fact that the national data from the last 10 years shows that almost 70% of heat stroke events occurred in the sport of football. So at this time, I'd like Coach Harvey, if you would, he's the assistant athletic director at Dutch Fork, but also our head athletic trainer. Has a great reputation within the athletics community to come talk to us about the more details of the project.
Thank you, Dr. Ross, Mr. Puckett, for allowing us to be here today. I tried to think of something that I could introduce my topic, and this is what I came up with. I remember as a young boy being at a family reunion years and years ago, and I noticed that all of the older statesmen, gentlemen, were outside sitting under a big shade tree. And they were talking about politics and all the things that you talk about at family reunions. And that has stuck in my mind that shade is a big thing when it's hot outside. And what we are going to show you today, hopefully, is that shade is all we need for our athletic programs, for our extracurricular programs, to stay safe and to be able to continue all of the things that they need to do during the hot months. What we're going to do is walk you through a few lessons as far as what we do with our student athletes to help them prepare for the heat. Then I'm going to give you a little introduction as to how we monitor heat, and then we're going to show you a little result that we came up with in our thinking as to how a pavilion that offers full shade for practice times will help us combat against extreme heat. This first slide basically just discusses what heat acclimatization is. With anything you do, you have to get used to and you have to get yourself accustomed to whatever environment you're in. Well, heat acclimatization basically means that you need to take a period of time to allow your athletes to get used to the heat. Your body has to learn how to work in the heat. Your body has to learn how to sweat properly. And then in return, you're able to stay in the heat longer, and your body is able to work and do all the things that are required for your particular activity while you're in the heat. So heat acclimatization is the term that we're going to be using here. To acquire heat acclimatization, research tells us that you need 15 days of activity in the heat for your athletes to get accustomed to that. Well, you can't just go out that first day and do everything. You're not going to be able to withstand the things that the coaches are putting you through, and our athletes need to take some time to be able to progress and gradually get used to the heat. So this particular slide just takes you through basically the first 5 days of practice, where you're going outside no more than 3 hours. The first 2 days you can only wear helmets and shorts. The next 3 and 4 day period you can continue with shoulder pads, and then by day 5 you can add what we call full gear, which is shoulder pads, helmets, their jersey, and their football pants. And again, we're only limiting to a 3-hour period up through day 5. Day 6 through 14, you can continue with full practices, and you can actually expand to a 5-hour period of time for your coach or for your team to be outside. But you have to stay below a 3-hour practice. So you could go out for 3 hours, take a break, and then come back later in the day for another 2 hours. By the time you reach day 15, acclimatization has occurred. Your athletes are able to work through the heat. Their bodies are working the way you want them to, as long as they are hydrating and practicing good nutrition and rest. By day 15, you feel comfortable that your athletes are able to handle the heat. Now, there are some notes here and some other things that you can look at. Again, practices cannot last more than 3 hours. You do have to take a break if you're going to come back for the 4th and the 5th hour. If you are in the weight room, which all of our athletes are in the weight room lifting weights, that has to count as part of that time period. Even though you're not in the heat, they're actually working, and you can't lift for a couple hours and then in turn go back outside. The biggest thing here is if an athlete has been absent, maybe they missed day 2 and 3, they can't progress to day 4 until you get them back through day 2 and 3. So there has to be some bookkeeping and some records that occur to make sure that all of your athletes are following through this process. And then there's a rest day after, it says there, must have a rest day after 6 consecutive practice days. You have to give them a day off. Well, this is the process that we go through in August to acclimatize our athletes. And again, this is a proven plan so that we are not doing too much too soon. Now, how do we measure the temperature and how do we know exactly what's going on outside in the environment? There's something called the wet bulb globe temperature. That is a process that we go through where you're looking at the ambient temperature, you're looking at the relative humidity, you're looking at the wind, and then also solar radiation or the sun. All of that is taken into account, and we have these little things, these Kestrel heat trackers that gather all of that data, and they're able to tell us what the wet bulb globe temperature is at any time. And this is what we convert it to. This is our wet bulb globe temperature chart. And if you look at that, it's basically divided up into a number of different levels where the hotter the temperature, obviously the color changes, and the amount of activity that you can do in a practice at that particular time changes. What we want to focus on today are the colors of orange, red, and black. And that is because once you get to those points, you have to actually alter what you're doing with your student athletes. Once the wet bulb globe temperature gets to above 87, that would be the orange level, we have to limit our practice to 2 hours, and we have to make sure that the athletes are only wearing their helmets and their shoulder pads. So they can go out in shorts, they can still practice, but we have to begin limiting what they're wearing at practice. And obviously you also have to add a number of water breaks and things that you're doing during that time period. When you get to the red level, practice can only be performed for 1 hour, and they cannot wear any equipment at all. And then when you get to the black, which is 92.1 on the wet bulb globe temperature, you cannot go outside. Okay. So we are also able to store data on these thermometers, and what we shared with you here is basically what happened last year between the months of May and September. And then we also color-coded the wet bulb globe temperature reading over there on the far right to show you during those days what our level was and what we had to do with our teams as far as practice is concerned. And so what we gathered through this time, okay, of May 16th all the way to September 14th, is we realized that we had 31 days during that period where we had lost time of practice, or we had to alter what we did 31 times for our student athletes. Now, what happens is we go outside, we put the thermometer down on the field. I go down normally around 1 o'clock, and it starts doing its thing. By 3 o'clock, we report back to the coaches what our wet bulb readings are. If the wet bulb is red, we report that you can go outside for an hour, but that's going to be it. If the wet bulb globe temperature is at a black reading, then we can't go outside. So you have a couple of options at that time. At 3 o'clock, the coaches have options. Number one, they can send everybody home and just not practice that day. Number two, we scurry around and see what's going on in the gyms. And are the volleyball teams practicing? Are the cheerleading teams practicing? Who's in the gym? Can we go in the gym and practice? Or do we wait? Well, just to let you know how that works, the sub-varsity teams, sometimes they may just send their kids home. Or maybe they'll have a study hall and then go in the gym. Our varsity team normally waits. And when does it get cool? It gets cool when the sun goes down. So during these 31 periods of time, it's possible to see that we had 100 and some odd young men sitting around campus in meetings or in the locker room till sometime 7, 8 o'clock. And then they would go out to practice. Okay? Now, what does shade do for us? If we look at this particular slide, this is probably the most important slide that we have for you. We took August 14th as our date to look at, from 10:30 in the morning till 9:30 in the evening. The first column that starts with that red reading of 91.9, that shows us the color rating or level for that day. And you can see that that was a very hot day. 10:30, it was 91.9. By 11:30, we went into the black. At 1 o'clock, probably had some wind, or maybe some clouds had passed by, so the rating dropped. Basically, what happened that particular day is, at 7 o'clock, we notified the coaches that the temperature had broken for the day, and we made plans to go outside probably around 7:30. If you look at the next column, what we've done here is we've taken the black bulb globe temperature out of play in our formula as to how we handle or how we look at the wet bulb globe temperature. That would be a shaded environment for our temperature for that day. And if you see that with a shaded environment, it's still hot, but it's not to the danger levels, it's not to the level of red and black that would alter what our teams and what our coaches were doing that day. So with a shaded environment, by 3 o'clock, we would be able to report to our coaches that you can go to our facility. You have to use the pavilion. You would have to practice inside. The key here is our athletes need to be in the heat. They have to stay acclimatized. We don't need an air-conditioned building to practice. We need to be in the heat so that on Friday nights, when we are, or Thursday nights, when we are below our danger levels, their bodies are able to withstand the heat. Their bodies are able to do the things that they have to do. So it's not a good idea to go practice in a 70-degree gym. You want them to be outside, and we have figured out a way to be able to accomplish that and still stay safe based on the temperatures outside. This is a study that was done by John Shirley. It basically verifies what we just presented to you. Mr. Shirley actually did this study with cows, and you can see there again, at this same time, in a non-shaded environment, you see the red bullet there at 90.4, but then a shaded environment, you see a yellow bullet at 83.8. Thank you, guys.
We'll pause for any questions for Coach Harvey.
Do we have any questions? Mr. Satterfield.
Mr. Harvey, I'm going to ask you all the hard questions since you've been around the longest.
Well, thank you.
The proposed size, Dr. Ross, of these pavilions is how big?
So these pavilions, I'll advance the slides. You can see at Chapin High School to cover that middle field. So
I mean, just as far as as it compares to a practice field, a football practice.
football field.
It's an entire football field.
Yes, sir.
And Mac, when you have after school, maybe Ronnie could help answer this too. Is practices are staggered as such? I mean, if only one team can get under there, what happens to the other teams?
Well, we're gonna have to be creative. I will tell you that, and every school is different, and every coaching staff does things differently. We like to practice together at Dutch Fork High School. Our B team, JV varsity, a lot of times are in the stadium. That's where we are. And then they break up and they go to different places. So
Yeah.
Indy, when we have our Indy periods, a lot of times those teams are together. Now,
Well,
the C team,
Yeah, I was
the
going
C
to ask,
team
but
is on another field.
the C team, would they be out in the sun?
No one can be out in the sun. We wouldn't do that.
So on those days where you feel like you need to be in the pavilion, would you just cancel practice for C team?
Or staggered.
Try to stagger them so that get in time? Okay.
So you would have the opportunity for some teams to go ahead and get their practices in and their day done instead of everybody.
I know you can have 100 kids on a middle school team, so that's a lot of kids. That's a lot of people under a pavilion, and I know varsity's not going to knock heads with B team.
Right.
So I was just curious how that would fit. But you're saying that the pavilion is a regulation football field size?
That's correct.
Because
Yes,
I don't
sir.
think we've ever discussed that part of it.
That's correct, yes, sir.
I have a question, just because I know it says multi-purpose pavilion, so multi-purpose, it's not just for football. So obviously the summertime, summer practice, that's football practices all summer, but so does marching band. So how do you prioritize, because that's obviously something that they're looking at when they practice as well, I'm assuming. So how do you prioritize the use of the facility at each school for all of the different activities that may want it?
Well, I think first of all, you gotta, right now, what we're doing right now is, and with our band people, we've actually brought them under the umbrella and told them they need to go by the same thing. So if football don't need to be out there, band doesn't need to be out there.
Right.
But I think what's important to realize is right now, you're talking about a day where, because of the heat, you're only be able to utilize any field space for this amount of time. Where this would allow you to utilize at least one field space for this amount of time. So, it opens up an opportunity where you can work out a rotation that's equitable for everybody. And some people could, depending on what the coach's availability and what they say, they could still practice early morning or late in the afternoon, but it opens up the possibility to use a space that no one can use for, if during the hottest times, maybe 8 hours. Now you've got 8 hours where you can be using a 100-yard space. So it allows you to get everybody fit in.
We use the statement a lot of times that our campus never rests.
Right.
There's something going on all the time. One of the best investments that you guys have ever made is the turf that we have in our stadium, because it never rests. There's always somebody on it. I envision this being the same way. This building would never rest. There would always be somebody in there doing something.
I have another question. Would that be a turf field if it's not in the sun? So we'd have the expense of another turf field. Was that in the original price, the ticket?
So
That
the
was
whole thing
presented?
is estimated with the turf field, correct? Yes, sir.
Ms. Huddle, I see you.
Thank you. I have one question and one suggestion. So the question, and you may not have the answer to this, but right off the top of your head, but I'm curious what the annual maintenance cost is, either in dollars or as a percentage, and to include like the turf and everything else.
And we can get specifics on that. I think what we would use for our benchmark is how we maintain the current turf fields. 'Cause a lot of the equipment that we already have for that field would be used for this field. It would just be
Right.
whatever extra gas that's needed to maintain that.
But you also have the roofing, and I don't know, the picture shows it with lights. Would it have lights?
Those will have lights as well, yes.
Okay. And then, so if we could get that, that would be great. And then I did have a suggestion. I'm really kind of worried. I understand the idea of trying to rotate it, but in reality, you've got football players trying to practice at probably the exact same time band members are. And football players are, I mean, and I can get away with saying this because I was in the band, it's a lot harder, right? I mean, physically demanding. And I'm not saying band's not, but just if you compare the two. So I'm just thinking in reality, it's probably going to be used primarily by the football team. And I just want to be very careful that we don't set expectations and have it pass and have all the band parents upset because they thought they were going to get to use it a lot. And I'm not saying they won't get to use it at all, but I mean, it sounds like it would be primarily football.
I would just like to say as an administrator, this is really going to be tasked not one versus the other, but the whole full program of usage. And to Mr. Puckett's point, we are expanding the usage time, right? So the rotation is important. It's interesting, on Friday night, we see that stadium doesn't belong to football. It belongs to band, it belongs to ROTC, it belongs to the athletics, the booster club. So I do think we can present to the board that rotation so that band parents and ROTC drill and everybody else knows that they have access to the space. But that's going to be the responsibility typically of the principal assigned through their assistant principal for operations or buildings to do that. So we'll put that as a part of our maintenance plan.
Mr. Hogan?
With the potential of this going through, would the schools be looking to utilize these fields even when the wet reading is not in the orange, the black, the yellow? Is this going to be used year-round for inclement weather with baseball, softball, track and field, other opportunities that, you know, possibly would have a rain out? Otherwise, if it's not a heat-reduced, you know, situation, is that the intent of that? And if so, like, I'm assuming it's going to have the proper protocols for lightning detection and everything else to where we're making sure we're not putting the kids in dangerous situations.
Yeah, we currently have a district-wide subscription to the Perry Weather
Okay.
app, which alerts us anytime, and it breaks it down by the radius and tells you 30-minute, 15, 10, when you can actually go out and be outside. So that would naturally, you know, and extend to this building. And what was the first part of that? Again, I'm sorry.
As far as it's going to be utilized for like inclement weather with, you know,
Absolutely, yeah.
baseball, softball.
And we've already talked about that, how just the intended use is going to feed into so many use cases. I mean, the sky's the limit, actually. We was talking to Dr. Ross about it. He's like, don't oversell it, don't oversell it. You know, but it really is like the sky's the limit, like Coach Harvey said, is that on a day or a minute that goes by that somebody's not on that turf, it's going to be the same thing here. And if you look closely at these pictures, and these are two different type facilities. I think the main thing is not, you know, if it's something that a district wanted to pursue, is not to get caught up in a specific picture, as much as we would use and implement a design that would be best for us. You know, the one on the left is a full-blown pavilion, and the one on the right looks like it's enclosed, but it has large doors that roll up, so that allows kind of the same principle. So I think it's important to notice that we would want to engage in a process that would be what would be the best use that would be in line with financially with what we need. I think that's important to note as well. But it'll be used all the time. Like if you look, one of these pictures you can see the net, like they have a batting cage, kind of like net that rolls down, so baseball and softball can use it. So it'll be used all the time.
Mr. Scully?
Yeah, it just occurred, theoretically, graduations could be hosted there.
Yeah, we had a slide we did delete that had potential uses on there, and so I think when we got to board meetings and birthday parties, we stopped the list. But the biggest thing, and I go to Ms. Huddle's point, is that we're obligated to be in compliance with Title IX. So part of that is to, when you said, Mr. Hogan, can softball use it and baseball use it? Having a facility, it's all about access. And so that's why the scheduling of this would have to go through the administration, so that we are held to access, equity, and compliance with Title IX. So that's why that schedule of rotation of who would use it. But to their point, now we create a bigger space of access.
Yeah, and just to, and I'm not questioning the need. You did a great job making the case, so I support it. My concern is more, rather than need, but one more of optics in terms of the referendum. And obviously, what's the plan to kind of, it makes sense when you sit down and have this discussion, but for a referendum, you don't have that time to make the case like that to the voters at large. They're going to key in on this as a frivolity and not the need that, and what's your plan to get out ahead of that?
That's a great point, and we actually started talking about it earlier, getting feedback from community groups. We're seeing now, Mr. Scully, that more states, especially in the southeast, in our climate zone, who can't afford larger facilities, are moving to this now. So I think we're the first in the state or second in the state right now that's considering it. But because it's part of the 5-year plan, thinking out, this is something that we think is really the future, due to the, I think 31 days miss was this year or last year. But the trend line we see, it's going to be much more where the community sees the needs of it. So part of it is just through education and having more information about what this does and the studies behind it.
Mr. Satterfield.
I had a couple more questions. That was my first, I think I had asked that question one time before. Will we be the only school in the state? In other words, have we talked to anybody that has a facility like this, to ask them, how they fared with it? Is this something that they feel like this is the best thing we've ever done?
Yes, sir.
Or,
In the state of South Carolina, there are some, if hybrid is the right word, where they've taken large buildings and converted them to indoor facilities. But to my knowledge, there's nothing at the scale of what we're talking about for
Yeah.
South Carolina. We actually started this conversation with proof when we went to Colquitt County in Georgia this past August. And when we went down there, our game was later in the evening. How motels are, we get kicked out of the motel at 12 o'clock, so now you've got 100 plus in your party that need somewhere to go. So Colquitt let us go to their facility. And when we walked in, I quickly got on the phone texting Dr. Ross with pictures of this place. I had the opportunity to talk to their athletic trainer later that day and was just asking him about the building. He told me two things. He said, the first thing is, everybody needs to understand this needs to be 100 yards plus end zones. They don't have end zones in their building. And he said that makes a huge difference. Well, when they built their building, a couple of years later, another school built their building and they made it the full size. So that seemed to make a big difference for him. Secondly, he said, we don't even measure wet bulb in that building anymore. We just go practice in there because we know it's cool enough. So those are two pretty big impacts that he.
yeah, and the other question, one sort of commentary I guess I have, and that is, we alluded, or you all alluded to earlier, that this would be something that would be under administrative control, because I've dealt with Title IX issues in the past, and like Ms. Hines was saying, the band parents would have ownership in this as well. So if this is just perceived as, because it looks like a football field, as something for the football team, there are a lot of folks that will say, look, Chapin doesn't have a fine arts center. How are we getting cover practice fields for football for August, or, you understand what I'm saying? So the idea that, I would not want to be the athletic director who had the band and the women's lacrosse and the football and everybody else in my office at the same time asking to use the facility, because that would be a difficult charge. But that is something to consider, and that's the reason I ask if anybody else has gone through this undertaking to see how, if they've, you always learn from other folks what they've done, so.
And I will add, that day that we showed up in Colquitt, as we were walking in the building, their band was practicing in the building. And we sat back and listened to them practice, and shortly thereafter, they gathered up their stuff and told us just how bad we were gonna get beat that night and all that kind of stuff. So we understand that.
Ms. Barnhart?
Will these have any form of bleachers or seating on the sides or kind of perimeter of them, or is it just the field
We have
itself?
not quoted in that. We have seen models where actually games are played in that, but we haven't expanded it out for that. I think, was that Texas where they had? They were playing certain games in there. So ours is just practice fields, not models for competition or visitors.
It is possible with portable bleachers, if you have the sufficient sidewalk around it, that you could put portable bleachers out and have games. You could do that.
All right, anyone else? Any final questions? All right, thank you.
I want to thank y'all so much for being here and your hard work on this. I think our earlier question, Ms. Barnhart asked where these would be located. So we just wanted to show where we conceptualize locating this. At Chapin High School, it would be covering that middle field. That field currently doesn't have lights, correct, Mr. Wessinger? So we did talk about the larger field, which is, of course, bigger, but we do have lights on that field. So we would consider our first option in that middle area. At Dutch Fork High School, Coach Harvey, your current middle field has lights on it as well. So we go in the back field there, which is larger space, and that's behind the middle school. And at Irmo High School, Coach Calvert is across the street. And I think this was the old football practice area before turf arrived in Irmo. So that would be the location there for the three sites there. So we asked our community in the forum, which of the following campus improvements is your first choice? Just asking what was their first choice. Security upgrades to feature cameras and safety vestibules, entry vestibules. Renovations of all the 2 ranked schools, so we lumped those together. And closing the walls at Harbison West and Nursery Road. The administrative and professional development building, or the covered practice pavilions. There was 152 responses, and you can see security was first, followed by the ranked facilities, then the enclosing of the walls, practice pavilion, and then last was the administrative and professional development building. So then we asked, what was your second choice? The second choice of those options. And for second choice, the renovations of the 2 ranked facilities, again, was first, followed by the vestibules, then Harbison West, and then you see more percentages for the pavilion and the admin building. So next, we started to talk about the instructional and workforce development projects and those groups. And this is towards our mission of preparing all students to be college and career ready, providing our challenging curriculum in a safe, secure, and diverse and equitable learning environment. We talked about to our community the need to ensure that our students are ready for the workforce challenges that we see in our state, as our counties of Lexington and Richland are in stable areas. So we shared our instructional plans that came from our November 23 meeting of the Digital Solutions and Artificial Intelligence at Dutch Fork High School to complement their STEM program, the Fine Arts Center at Chapin High School, and the Small Business Incubator at Irmo High School. We have shared conceptuals of that incubator from LS3P. If you're driving past St. Andrews Road, you'll see the work, so thanks, Mr. Wiseman, they're getting going, but this would be conceptualized to be behind that facility as we replace the current cafeteria with a new cafeteria. So the old cafeteria, or the current cafeteria, this is a conception of the economic view of that building to include a food truck vending area, a bank. It has fabrication areas. This is a conceptual of the inside of that facility that would be used for our small businesses and to incubate those small businesses. We shared about the Construction Workforce Development Lab that would be housed at the Center for Advanced Technical Studies to help produce the next level of operators and surveyors and mechanics for construction. We talked about the Fine Arts Center Auditorium conceptual at Chapin High School that would fill in the gap between the current building with the fine arts programs and the main academic wing. This was a conceptual done by JHS of how that facility would be between those two buildings, a front view of that, as well as an interior conceptual. We asked the community, those who were attending, which instructional program for workforce development is most important to you. And you can see the responses regarding the Dutch Fork High School Digital Solutions and Artificial Intelligence. Was then followed by the Construction Workforce Development Lab, then the Small Business Incubator, and then the Fine Arts Center at Chapin High School. And then we went into the rezoning related projects. We shared the impacts of the Broad River Road widening program through Richland County and its impact on the current Dutch Fork Elementary School. We shared the opportunity to bring back a historic building of Rich Lex to house the Academy for Success, Adult Education, and the 5 virtual school. We shared a conceptual of the new Dutch Fork Elementary School and how that would look at these 2 elevations. We shared that we had the opportunity to expand Lake Murray Elementary School by adding 20,000 additional square feet to that space, as well as expand Chapin Elementary School with 16,000 square feet for that. These 2 facilities have portables that are in use. These wings would take those portables out of operation as we move into the building. We then asked which of the following rezoning related projects is most important to you. And you can see the half of the attendees. This is, I think, one of our largest participants for the results. 169 of total. Half of them said the elementary school wings at Chapin Elementary and Lake Murray Elementary were important, followed by the new Dutch Fork Elementary, and then the Rich Lex Education Center. What I wanted to do is show how we have been taking feedback from the community and making adjustments to the plans. And so to go over the adjustments, the plans, and how we have developed our map options, I'd like to introduce our Chief of Student Services and Planning, Dr. Mike Harris, who is accompanied by the Director of Accountability, Dr. Van Holden. Dr. Harris.
Thank you all very much. As Dr. Ross led in, what we're here today to talk about is some of the modifications and updates we've made as we've received input and as new options have been put on the table. This all is focused on the adjustments that we've made, looking at this new adopted or new proposed grade structure and school alignment, school feeder plan. And I want to take us back to kind of January 8th, which is one of the first times we talked about the numbers and what they might look like if we moved to this plan. One of the first things we noted is that if we shift to a plan like this, where we have this, this grade structure and alignment, when we start running the numbers on these issues, putting 5th grade back into Chapin or Lake Murray Elementary School is going to raise the enrollment at those two schools to somewhere between 867 and 956 students based on the data that we had available. In addition, shifting Ballantyne to the Chapin cluster so that it now is going from Dutch Fork High School primarily to Chapin High School is going to increase the enrollment at Chapin High School to somewhere between 1,883 students to 1,992 students. So what that data analysis told us when we prepared it and presented it to the board was that if you want to go with a school assignment plan like that, if you want to go to the grade structure that we've got, you're going to have to make some adjustments to the attendance lines or the school assignment plans in order to pull that off. We made some modifications and brought those before the board on January 8th, some proposals, and you saw a quick summary here of what those enrollments might look like at the 4 elementary schools in question. You can see we had Ballantyne and Lake Murray and Chapin kind of around that 700 number, and Piney Woods around 630 students. Again, with the 3 Chapin area schools that are currently Chapin area schools, we're adding 5th grade. Ballantyne is requiring a shift. To do that, we proposed a map that looks somewhat just like this. So this has been the map that's been out there for a little bit here since January 8th. You can see we've got the revisions to the Ballantyne area with the Ballantyne students being rezoned under this map for H.E. Corley, Dutch Fork Elementary School, River Springs, and Oak Point, and then modifications to Chapin and Lake Murray and Piney Woods taking place from there. However, as Dr. Ross mentioned, we have been making modifications and making adjustments to that plan based on the feedback from the community. As he mentioned, and quite critically, finished up that last part talking about the potential additions of new classrooms at Lake Murray and Chapin. Well, for adding new classrooms to Chapin and Lake Murray, it means we have to change the attendance lines for fewer students because we're increasing capacity at our 2 largest schools. So additional capacity opens up new possibilities for our school district and our school assignment plans. And you can see a revised proposal here that's based on adding those additional spaces to the 2 schools. You're seeing a lot less changes to the attendance lines. We took some numbers here. Now, what we're comparing here are the numbers as of the January 8th presentation to the numbers as of April 15th, okay? Again, these are going to be based off of the attendance lines here. What you're seeing in that far right-hand column is based on the new map. And you can see the Ballantyne Elementary School enrollment comes down significantly. Under the original lines we brought to you, Ballantyne was up around 700. Under the new map, what we're seeing is it'd be somewhere less than 600. You do see Chapin and Lake Murray increasing, but again, that's as we're adding capacity to those 2 schools. And you see Piney Woods changes. There was no actual changes to the Piney Woods lines under this. That's actually just a change in enrollment since January 8th. They've added students. That's what's causing that part of it. No changes to their lines, just they have more students in that area since the time period when we brought the initial stuff to you, the initial map. The advantage, obviously, is it impacts fewer students. Fewer students are going to be changing elementary schools as a result. Some students are still going to change elementary schools with the new option that we're bringing forward, but again, a larger number are going to remain at their current school. The other part of this map that we like is that it opens the door for future growth and expansion. One thing we don't want to do is continuously change attendance lines. So in the event that we continue to see growth in the Chapin area, the western part of the district, the intention of this map is if we're changing fewer students now and ultimately we decide we need another elementary school out that way, we've designed this one in a way that maybe gives us some flexibility to do that without continuing to disrupt the attendance lines and which schools students are attending out that way. So here's a quick comparison of the 2 maps. The map on the left is the map that we brought to you on January 8th. That's with no referendum. That's the kind of changes we need to make. And the map that we've got on the right there is if we're able to add those classrooms at Chapin Elementary and Lake Murray Elementary, in addition to listening to some other pieces of community feedback. One of the other pieces we've been considering, based on input, is high school assignments. To this point, the only area that we brought forth that would change high school assignments is the area that I've kind of encircled in red there. It's the area right around Ballantyne Elementary School. So that area, you can see Ballantyne Elementary School is right across from the green area there. The green area is the park. Ballantyne Elementary School is kind of in that southern portion of that red area. So those students are so close to Ballantyne, they remain zoned for Ballantyne under the January 8th map that we brought forward and the most recent one that we're showing you today. But they also then shift to Chapin. That area is currently zoned for Dutch Fork High School. But again, they're going to stay with the Ballantyne attendance zone. So if the bond referendum passes, one of the considerations we've had to make is that gives us some chance to alleviate overcrowding at Chapin by increasing capacity at Spring Hill. That's because we have the Academy for Success that would be shifting out of Spring Hill into the renovated campus that's presently known as Dutch Fork Elementary School. If the bond referendum doesn't pass, of course, one of the considerations we've been making is that we do see enrollment increasing in Chapin. We would worry about overcrowding or potential overcrowding at Chapin High School. In order to alleviate that, one of the considerations that we're bringing forward is that we might need to make some modifications to our high school attendance lines. We might need to change up how we've historically assigned students and the map that we've used for high school assignment. The area we're focusing on with these proposals is the area geographically between Spring Hill High School and Dutch Fork High School. There's several neighborhoods there, and we're going to focus on just a few of them here tonight. But that's the map of the area we're focusing on. We're going to zoom in just a little bit further, and we're going to look at areas 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? Now, on the next slide, you're going to see exactly which neighborhoods and areas those are, because sometimes we didn't just limit it to the actual major neighborhood within those geographic zones. We included parcels, which include a few students, a few homes around those areas. So you can see some of this expand. So area number 1 includes Chelsea Park and parcels along Will Richardson Circle and Shady Grove Road up to Kennerly Road and parcels along Pat Ellison Road. Area number 2 is Rolling Creek and parcels along Kennerly Road. Area 3 is the courtyards at Rolling Creek, the preserve at Rolling Creek, and Woodsmoke Family Campground. And area 4 is Waterfall. So that's what we're looking at. We also tried to consider looking at that information, looking at the students who are currently in high school in those 4 areas. How many of those students currently attend Spring Hill? So those students would currently be zoned for Chapin, but 25.6% of those students attend Spring Hill by choice. So when we did our analysis, we removed 25.6% of the students in that area and said, no matter which school you're zoned for, we're going to assume that you're going to continue to attend Spring Hill. So we pulled those numbers as of April 15th, how many students are in each of those neighborhoods. We removed 25.6%. We rounded to the nearest whole number there. And then we considered, okay, if we're going to shift those neighborhoods to Dutch Fork High School, we're going to add the sum of the 3 steps above that. We're going to add that sum to Dutch Fork High School. We're going to subtract that sum from the Chapin numbers. Now, you will see there that we chose to do that based on the January 8th numbers. That's based on a variety of reasons and the technical details we were dealing with on the mapping side of this. So for a standard number there, we're comparing to the January 8th number. I didn't make a modification there based off of the April 15th numbers. Yes, sir. Yep.
This is an awful lot of information all at once, and I'm
Yes, sir.
desperately trying to keep up with it.
Yep.
You were talking about those neighborhoods, Rolling Creek, and some of those that are near that attendance there, that sort of in the middle there. Those students that you're saying that will be shifted to Dutch Fork High School?
They're currently zoned for Chapin High School. And then
Okay, but you're saying, well, what about their elementary school and middle schools?
Yes, the intention right now is they would remain zoned for the elementary maps would not change. They
So,
would remain
so
zoned.
this is going to be, I know that you were looking for that true feeder, and maybe I'm a little confused on the presentation, but will the true feeder still be in place for every school if the kids are at this elementary school, their assignment, their middle school, and their high school still remain the same?
No, they would not. We would not be able to maintain that true feeder system under this scenario. But we already have one modification like that in the elementary area with some students who are going to
Well, the reason I ask is that was one of the selling points. That was one of the things that was real important. And the other question that I have before I forget my question, and this has come up in some other conversation that I've had with some other folks that have asked me. I know that we have a certain percentage, a higher percentage of students, correct, Dr. Ross, of Chapin students that go to Spring Hill than the other schools? Percentage-wise, correct. Percentage-wise. The question that sort of comes up, or has come up on some other discussions I've had with some folks, is that if those students decide they want to stay at Chapin, what do we, as a district, I mean, are we mandating that certain neighborhoods are going to attend Spring Hill, even if they're zoned for Chapin, or are we just keeping our fingers crossed that those students will want to go, that percentage will continue to ask or request school of choice with Spring Hill?
So where you're going over is if this does not pass, correct? Yeah, so what we're looking at, this is the worst-case scenario. If it passes, we feel like we have a plan. What we're worried about now is if this does not pass. If this does not pass, it's going to drastically shift the high schools. As we were talking about that feeder system, our selling point was this would not impact 99.7% or 99% of the students would keep their same high school. What we have to plan for is if this does not pass, we're going to have to find space because we can't use Spring Hill as an option anymore. And that's kind of what we're kind of outlining is how do we make this work? Where do all these children go to high school if this does not pass?
But, oh, go ahead, Dr. Harris.
I was just going to add one other point to something I heard you say too. We also consider the trends in terms of those students who are going from one high school over to Spring Hill High School, and the trend over the course of time is that Chapin High School had a larger number of students who are participating or at least attending, opting to go to Spring Hill. So that was another consideration also.
Well, the only other, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mr. Scully?
Is that trend as a result of requests for those students going or placement by the district of those students?
Oh, those are purely requests.
Okay.
Those are purely requests, absolutely, based on the system of requests earlier.
Ms. Huddle, I see that you're raising your, did your kitty have a question?
I know more.
Just kidding.
I know the quantity of students from Chapin is higher, but but Chapin's also a bigger school. So what is the percentage of students relative? Could you tell us what the percentage is from Dutch Fork, Irmo, and Chapin that go to Spring Hill?
I can get that for you. We do have that available, but I don't have that with me, Ms. Huddle, but we do have that information available.
Okay, because I really have the same question that I think Mr. Satterfield has. I know we're looking at, supposedly what happens if the bond referendum doesn't pass, but I think the big question is, what's the plan if it does, and we don't get the number of students expected out of Chapin don't request Spring Hill? Are we going to rezone, or are we going to force students to go to Spring Hill? What's the solution?
So we have two options if that happens. If it passes, and from Chapin Middle School and Spring Hill Middle School, you don't have enough students going into Spring Hill High School, you have two options that I see at this point. One, you could rezone these areas that we're talking about into Dutch Fork, where we have room. Two, you could zone Spring Hill. We are looking at the trend data of selecting Spring Hill High School at about a quarter and seeing if we were taking that out of both schools, both middle schools, this plan could work. And that's not with they don't have the current arts package that they're requesting. So we think if we give them that arts package, watch these trends, then we can make that work. But those are the two options that I'm seeing. Dr. Holden, is there something else?
That's correct. That's what we're looking at here. Yeah, we're trying to, this is one of the options we're working through tonight, is what that might look like.
And I had one other question. If you go back to the map of those neighborhoods, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think by road, those neighborhoods are actually closer to Dutch Fork than Chapin High School. Is that correct?
I have not done the Google Map search to see what the exact mileage would be there, but geographically, if we go back one more, we're talking about areas that are very close to Dutch Fork High School. So
Yeah.
I would assume so, yes.
The reason I bring it up is if you look over a 5 or 10-year trend on your enrollments, the only one that's going up is Chapin High School. And we got some numbers, I believe, several months ago from the county about building permits. And so it looks like that trend is going to continue. So I guess what I'm making the point is that this may happen no matter what. Whether or not the bond referendum passes, we may be faced at some point with moving these neighborhoods to Dutch Fork.
What say you?
No,
And so this is what
yeah,
we're
all right,
talking
so,
about it now.
So, yeah, I mean, and what we do know, based on years of data from folks like the Midlands Council of Governments, folks like Lexington County, folks like Richland County, is we are seeing growth in the western side of the district. It's unavoidable. I know various things have been tried to kind of allow the community to prepare for that growth or give us time to get the infrastructure set up, but I think there's no question that growth is coming. You can look at the pipeline maps from Lexington County, which we've been watching for 5 or 6 years now. We track every development that's coming through. We know how many lots are in each one. We try to anticipate exactly how many of those houses are going to be occupied by school-age children. There's a million ways to get that wrong. We'll never be perfect, but yet the end conclusion is always the same. Growth is occurring in the western Chapin part of the district, and we need to be preparing for that. And this is one of those ways we're attempting to do that and put some options on the table. Is that fair? Okay. And I apologize for misinterpreting your question earlier, so I think I appreciate Dr. Ross helping me clarify.
I know there's no easy answer to
Yeah.
this. I understand that. I've had this discussion with several folks, and, they ask my opinion, and my opinion is that I'm not exactly sure. I've shared before with other folks that I drive around or ride my motorcycle or whatever around Chapin, and I look at all the new developments, and I keep thinking, oh, my Lord, they're coming. And, I mean, there's not much we can do not to let them come, obviously, but they are coming. And so I would, if we're going to have a referendum, I just want to make sure that, and I know everybody does, want to make sure that we're preparing for that growth and not hope that it doesn't grow in certain areas, if that makes sense. Because the question about that I had was, well, like with Spring Hill High School, I hate to be dependent on the goodness of other folks or the desire, because Spring High School could change. I mean, schools do change over the years. And somebody might offer a new program somewhere else, and lo and behold, there they go flocking to that area. I mean, when I started at Chapin, they were 2A, no middle school. And look at what they've become over the years. So that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Hogan?
With the thought process of Spring Hill opening up capacity with the Academy for Success moving to Lex Rich building, do we know exactly how much capacity we anticipate opening up at Spring Hill as far as number of students?
It's 2 floors. Give me a quick second. I think, not including the administrative area and stuff, it's roughly 10 classrooms for each, it's 12 classrooms for each floor, so you're talking roughly 24. I think some of the administrative buildings for usage would probably change somewhat, so it might be a little bit higher, but based on the footprint right now, it's pretty close.
How many students are currently enrolled in the Academy for Success? Ballpark.
I don't know today's number, but certainly 100 plus, for
plus.
certain. And,
Okay.
but we're, to answer your question, we're talking anywhere from 200 to 300 students for your initial question.
Okay.
We've been using 250 as a marker, but, yeah, that's the relief of Chapin.
Let me ask, and Mr. Hogan, you brought up a good point. Are we anticipating then that when we move the Academy for Success, that those classrooms will be filled with Chapin students?
Excellent point. So our goal is not to reduce the Irmo seats or the Dutch Fork seats, but that entire wing, that 250 or 300, depending on the programs that you bring in, would all be Chapin students from Chapin Middle School and Spring Hill Middle School.
And see, that's kind of the conversation we've been having for months, is whether or not all of those students, in excess of Chapin students that attend right now, if we can get that many more students to attend in the future. I mean, I think that's something we've been talking about for months. I mean, I don't think we know that until we implement the plan and we see how the new middle school models
Could work.
are able to influence Chapin students to attend Spring Hill.
And that's a great point. What we were asking is, typically what we've seen is that we could zone it and say this is going to determine it. What we've seen now with choice is that we can zone something, and that doesn't necessarily mean the families show up there. So we have been trying to create options within our community so that they can show up here. I think we got a report of, just in our area, 1,000 homeschool students. If that switches and tomorrow they show up, so we can't necessarily drive where they're going. What we were asking for is, with this model in 2026, 27, we would open up with that. If we did not see those trends continuing from that 25.6% above, we would have 2 years to then move to what we're talking about now, which is the Dutch Fork option. But it would at least give Spring Hill High School 2 years to try to make this work. And that's why we were looking at, okay, what's the parachute plan? And that's what we're kind of going over tonight. We do see that. Now, if it doesn't pass, we go to it right now. It is in place now. But if it does pass, you could watch that trend. How did that first ninth grade class look different from that last year's ninth grade class? And that would show, did we lose in percentage from that area, or did we gain in percentage? And those trends could help us project out 2 years before we have to do it. But if it doesn't pass, what we're talking about tonight is we go to that on day one.
Yep, go ahead.
So if it does pass, and let's say we're 2 to 3 years down the road and the model isn't projecting to where we're hoping to anticipate today, would the path for the district be an enrollment freeze, or would it be a redistricting?
If we don't see those numbers trending, it would be to what we're talking about now. We would go to the does not pass option.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, I know that we interrupted Dr. Holden in the middle of, oh, Ms. Huddle, I see, go ahead.
I just had one question about that, because I've received, as I'm sure everybody else has, a lot of calls and texts from parents. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Ross, but any redistricting, any redrawing of lines would require board approval, correct?
Yes, it's something that we bring to the board always. As I look at that policy, it says, doesn't say approve, but it says, but we bring it to the board. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We would not make this administrative change without having the board take a vote on it.
I know you wouldn't do that, but I had some parents that said, well, the board would, could they, they're talking like this is just gonna happen. And you guys would have a say, right? And I was like, yes, I believe so,
yes,
but I will
ma'am.
double check.
I've had the same question about making sure that there was a board vote, or asking whether or not there was a board vote. All right, we're gonna let Dr. Holding continue.
So what we're going to be looking at next is what are the implications from an enrollment perspective if we move forward with these types of changes to the high school lines. Again, we haven't really talked about a lot of high school changes. We've primarily focused on that one area around Ballantyne Elementary School. Here we're focused on 4 areas that are actually still near Ballantyne Elementary School, but north of it, that have historically been zoned for Chapin High School, but under these proposals would shift to Dutch Fork High School, again, as an attempt to alleviate the overcrowding that is at Chapin High School, and also with keeping in mind that we wouldn't be able to alleviate some of that overcrowding by opening up space at Spring Hill. I've mentioned already the methodology of how we calculated some of these numbers, and now I'm going to take you into the numbers. The first thing we're going to focus on, though, is areas 1 through 3. So we broke this up into 2 slides. The first slide just looks at if you move areas 1 through 3. Okay, so again, that's where we're looking at the area kind of around Chelsea Park, the area around Rolling Creek, and the areas around the preserve at Rolling Creek and the courtyards at Rolling Creek and Woodsmoke Family Campground. The first 2 lines show us information about Chapin High School. And you can see when we brought numbers to you previously, we were looking at Chapin High being somewhere between 1645 and 1720. But with the modifications here, if we were to move areas 1 through 3 to the Dutch Fork zone, we'd be looking at 1,551 to 1,633, somewhere in that range of students. If we work our way down, so the next line there, we're looking at a modification that would take us from Dutch Fork High School being somewhere between 1,459 to 1,608 students. It would take us a little bit higher to 1,553 or 1,693 over the 4 years. So we looked at like kind of the students who are currently in grades 6 through 11 here, or 6 through 12, and kind of moved them up in high school age cohorts. So we're looking at the students who are in high school age in 23, 24, high school age in 24, 25, high school age in 25, 26, and then high school age in 26, 27. That's not a projection. It's simply based off of the number of students who were in the district as of January 8th with the modifications we're making here from the April 15th numbers in those neighborhoods. If we looked at areas 1 through 4, you can see further adjustments happening there. And you can see it brings the numbers down just a little bit more. So for example, at Chapin High School in the final year, we're looking at dropping from 1,551 students to, if you add in that final neighborhood waterfall, you come down to 1,500, and I believe it says 32 students there. So it then increases Dutch Fork High School by a similar amount. So essentially what we're looking at here is we've already got the January 8th map that we brought before you with elementary school changes. What we've further done here is added a new map for consideration. That new map is based off of the possibility of adding new classrooms, new capacity at Chapin and Lake Murray Elementary School, and what that might do for us in terms of limiting the number of students who are being reassigned at the elementary level. We also are bringing forward the proposal that if we do not move forward with the bond referendum, we need to take some immediate steps here to alleviate overcrowding at Chapin High School. And some of those steps would involve changing the school assignment plans for students who are currently zoned for Chapin High School and moving those students to Dutch Fork. And it would be the areas that we've talked about already tonight, areas 1 through 3 or areas 1 through 4 from the maps that we brought forward. At this time, I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Ross, or I'll open it up the board for questions at his direction.
We'll take any questions on the rezoning and the.
Ms. Huddle, I see you.
Yes, could you go back, and I know it's probably in a different slide presentation, but I'm trying to draw the connection between the bond referendum and rezoning. So I think I get it when it comes to what could happen for Chapin High School, right? So the bond referendum has a new facility that would essentially, or repurposed facility that would move those students out of Spring Hill High School and make more room for Spring Hill High School. So I get that. But at the elementary level, how does the list of schools, the list of projects, exactly what is the tie-in of those to rezoning? So, can we do that? Can we go to that list on the bond referendum and say, okay, these bond referendum items or item results in rezoning?
Okay, good call. Go forward.
Go for it.
And Dr. Holt, I'm going to ask you to just kind of help me on the math here. So I'll go to these questions here.
Okay.
All right.
Well, could you just go to the list? Could you just, the list of projects?
That's what Van was trying to get to. I'm sorry, Dr.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I know it's way back.
All right.
I've gotten a ton of questions about this, and I don't know, so I can't. Yeah, so obviously the security doesn't, the new Dutch Fork doesn't, correct?
So, yes. Now, what you will see, we have slated 4 projects that are on that rezoning related projects of this. The new Dutch Fork, that is important because without that, there's no place to put the Academy for Success. Right, and so
But at
that,
the elementary school level, it's not causing rezoning at the elementary school level, correct?
what would happen though is if you did not have the new Dutch Fork, then we would have to now use the old Dutch Fork the old Dutch Fork Elementary School to feed in the elementary redistricting. So the next project would be, which aligned to that, are the 2 wings at Chapin Elementary School and Lake Murray Elementary School.
Okay, but that's really to accommodate the middle school alignment, right? We're not talking about that causing or requiring redistricting, are we?
So with the expansion of that, how we redistrict, right, you can do these without, and we've shown that map. We've shown the map that we can redistrict today and use our current elementary school facilities to redistrict. That's that first map. What we were showing in the second map that is dependent on the referendum is how these neighborhoods would go back. So to your
Right.
point, yes, you can.
And that's what I'm asking, is because I don't understand, I get the high school, I get that, but I don't understand at the elementary school level how these projects are tied to redistricting. That if we do, one of these projects at the elementary school level, why it would result in redistricting. I'm getting that question, because people don't understand.
I just
and
wanna
I
make
know
sure
most of
that
this is coming from Ballantyne. They don't understand what project on here requires us to rezone children that go to Ballantyne Elementary School.
Can I take that one, sir?
Yes, sir.
So the key issue, I believe, in terms of why we need to rezone, if we're looking at the proposed grade structure and feeder plan, right? We cannot add 5th grade back to Chapin and Lake Murray Elementary School without significantly increasing the enrollment at those 2 schools and putting it beyond what we're comfortable with. And I think I'd go to Mr. Wiseman there about what the enrollment capacity is at those schools.
Right, but isn't that why we're adding wings?
So that does alleviate some of it. We're also planning for future growth. In addition, what we're doing here, and I'll go to Dutch Fork Elementary School because it's a very good example. We're actually going to be rezoning part of Ballantyne Elementary School for Dutch Fork. So we're adding students to Dutch Fork Elementary School, which, and Mr. Wiseman can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, we're near capacity at that school. In addition, we're in communication with Richland County, watching their
That school,
at Dutch Fork Elementary School.
not even close.
So we're adding, if you look at the upcoming pipeline and what we're looking at for Richland County, there's proposed developments that will occur there that will significantly increase the enrollment. And that's in that area of land that takes us from the current Dutch Fork Elementary campus up the road towards the interstate.
Okay, but that's still a separate issue. I'm sorry I'm being so difficult on this, but I'm getting so many questions on it and I don't understand it. Again, why, we're not talking about moving Ballantyne Elementary kids to any of these schools on this list. We're talking about moving them to H.E. Corley. So I'm having a trouble understanding how these projects cause, why the redistribution of children at Ballantyne Elementary is being tied into this.
And I just want to start over because I think I need to start from the beginning of why we made this. And it's right after, I went in the wrong direction here. I know you want to see the list, but let's start with what we are trying to solve. And then I think that would answer that question. If you look at this as my house only, and I look at why am I being moved out of Ballantyne Elementary School? Which one of these projects is causing me to be moved out of Ballantyne Elementary School? You can't answer that question. It does not, that wasn't the initiate of them being moved. What's initiating them being moved is we are putting 5th grade into these 2 schools. And when we put 5th grade into these 2 schools, we don't have enough room for them in their current zone.
Right, I understand that. So that, you really answered my question, because that's what I thought it was, is it's not really the buildings, it's not the bond referendum, it's the desire to move to a true middle school, design, correct?
Right, a K through, our grade structure, right. Because we're moving to that grade structure, we now are using the existing buildings to house all the elementary schools, elementary students in Chapin. Instead of building a new building out in Chapin, it was, and I'll take it if it's a bad idea, but it was my decision to use an existing building that we had. The closest building that we had elementary to those Chapin buildings was Ballantyne Elementary School. And so it was that decision to move them down. Now, after our first meeting, I think our second meeting that we had in the community forums was with the Ballantyne parents. And at that meeting, we heard those issues about, I can pass that school and I still can't go, the proximity issues. We heard about what if we could add on to Lake Murray? Could that help? And so we went back, ran the numbers again, changed the lines, and we found out by building these wings, we would impact less of the elementary school students. And so that's why these projects are now on the referendum, because they would impact less of the elementary school students there.
Okay, I want to jump in real quick because kind of, I understand where Ms. Huddle is coming from, because it seems like the rezoning and the bond referendum are very like intertwined on what happens. But if say the bond referendum fails and we're looking at rezoning, the fifth grade model, the intermediate school model it's already been decided by the board, if I'm not mistaken, that we're eliminating the intermediate model. So we're still going to have fifth grade at those elementary schools without the bond referendum, and the two middle schools, the Chapin Middle School and Spring Hill Middle School, like all of that is still happening, win, lose, or draw, right? I mean, so that's still happening.
That's still happening.
So the rezoning part of that, it's still pretty similar, regardless of whether or not the bond passes or not. I mean, correct? I mean, it's not like way different.
Yeah, so we have the two maps there that show that. You know,
Yeah.
and again, I apologize for the lack of clarity here if that was the case, but all this is, if we want to go K-5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12, rezoning is required. These two maps here show the differences here. These are all based off of K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. Rezoning is required. You're looking at if you did not have a referendum, what it would be on the left, and if you did have a referendum, what it would be on the right, yes.
Yeah, but rezoning is happening.
Yes.
That's
both
correct.
It's
processes.
happening.
Yes.
And it's just a matter of what that looks like, you know, and in terms of the schools that are gonna now bring in fifth graders that are already at, you know, pretty packed. I mean, it's gonna be more comfortable if we build another wing.
That's right.
You know, I mean, so it's still happening. I just think that I think that that's where the confusion is I think that there's a confusion between what those rezoning lines look like and then trying to say, like, with or without a referendum. I think rezoning in itself is difficult.
It's
And people are gonna be upset. You're gonna rock the boat. People are, I mean, my kid has been rezoned. I understand how that is. That's tough. But, I mean, I think the fact that it's tied together, I think, is causing confusion on the support of what projects we have and what's going on. I don't know if that's what you're hearing, Ms. Huddle, but I get where you're coming from.
And I think to that point, Madam Chair, rezoning is happening. How we rezone depends on the bond. There are more elementary school children in Chapin, and that's growing. We need a new building. I'm commandeering Ballantyne. With a bond, I can keep more of the Ballantyne students at Ballantyne. Without it, I have less of them there. So we're using Oak Point, River Springs, and H.E. Corley and Dutch Fork L, to accommodate that growth. Those 4 schools are accommodating that shift. How far we shift is based on if we have the referendum or not. If we don't have it, you can see how far we're gonna shift the Ballantyne students out of Ballantyne. If we have it, we can keep more students there.
Mr. Snyder?
So, Dr. Ross, would you say if the referendum passes, there'll be less movement?
Amen, that's correct. If the referendum passes, it gives us the ability to have less movement, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And also, if the referendum is not a reason for the Ballantyne families to vote against it, because rezoning's not a reason for them not to vote for the referendum. More will be impacted if it fails.
I would say more will be impacted if it fails, yes, sir. And what we wanted to show is the data behind this area. When Dr. Harris and Dr. Holden get into those pieces, they're going parcel by parcel, hundreds of thousands of parcels. Then they coordinate with transportation to make sure that this can work. We just wanted to show at this workshop that if it fails, we're gonna have to make some serious decisions about these areas that are going to Chapin, moving them into Dutch Fork High School. These 4 communities, we can't all keep them at Chapin. And to Dr. Holden's point, even if it passes, and I'm sorry, to Mr. Hogan's point, if it passes, and how much time do we have? We will now look at the trends of that area. If we're not seeing that movement to Spring Hill, then we have to come back to this and play. Were there any other questions? Oh, you finished.
I think I guess I am. I wasn't sure.
He's turning it over to you for the rest of the
You
time.
finished my part. Any other questions?
Anybody
for-
else? All right,
you all.
thank you, Dr. Holden.
Thank you, Dr. Holden. And there are tireless scenarios that we run, and I appreciate the time and effort that it takes to get to these conclusions. But to that point, we've seen that change over time. We've seen this in our community. If you've been here in the late 70s and 80s, all the students were in Irmo, and so we built the schools in Irmo. Here in the late 90s, early 2000s, then all the students were in the Dutch Fork area, and that's where the buildings were built. And so as we address our issues in Chapin, the goal is not to continue that trend, but because we're seeing the majority of the growth in Chapin and room in Dutch Fork, we are using one of the Dutch Fork facilities, and that's Ballantyne. And so, to Mr. Scully's point, it's going to impact them. How it impacts them depends on if we have the funding to build bigger buildings in Chapin. And so, we looked at some recommendations from that meeting at Ballantyne Elementary about mental health services, and we work with a lot of military families and transient families. We have a lot of experience with that through the work of the board. We have programs like Care Solace that helps families with any of the emotional, psychological, or social issues. A lot of information or questions have come up about grandfathering. Grandfathering is a blanket qualification which would defeat the purpose of the rezoning because we need the room. However, we are putting together what's called preferred choice. This would be after the choice window closes, those families who were zoned out of Ballantyne would have preferred choice back in as space is available. So this is what we felt would be something that we can provide to those families that were zoned out. And then also, we had the feedback to build on to the existing schools in Chapin. And so that was the option that we added for Lake Murray and Chapin Elementary. So with that, if it passes, 99% of the students will keep their original high school. 1% will be rezoned from Dutch Fork High School to Chapin. That's that area of those 4 neighborhoods that we're gonna have to watch as we look at trends. There's no plans to remove the 3K, 4K programs. In fact, I think we're gonna add one at Piney Woods. So we talked about how we filled, which is different from theoretical as we work towards maximum and target. And then from our preparing using our 45th day numbers, you can see how there are more students in Chapin. We are seeing an interesting trend, though, and neighborhoods like Whitehall are generating more elementary school students than they have in the last 7 years. So we're keeping our eye on that. But you can see the majority of the red is in Chapin. The space is in Dutch Fork. The closest school to Chapin in the Dutch Fork area is Ballantyne. And so that's why it's the most impacted school. This is our current educational structure. The board has acted. We're not going to be in this educational structure anymore. We're going to move to this educational structure. I would note, if you look at the Ballantyne School here, you see it's both blue and green. It's both blue and green in the past model. I want to explain that because with this, we were able to bring in additional families back to Ballantyne with a larger Lake Murray Elementary School, a larger Chapin Elementary School, a new Dutch Fork Elementary School. We could bring more students back into Ballantyne. We talked about 3 specific roads: Twin Gates, Marina Road, and A.J. Amick. However, they can go back into Ballantyne Elementary School. However, they still have to go to Dutch Fork Middle. That's their current path. That's their current flow. Ballantyne currently splits. It sends students to Chapin and Dutch Fork, but this would be a deliberate, they can go back to their school of Ballantyne, but they would be zoned to go to Dutch Fork Middle. If it does not pass, you see where Ballantyne does not split anymore. It's all blue. Because all of those students on those 3 roads, they're gonna have to go to either H.E. Corley or River Springs, whatever they're zoned for. Ballantyne now will become all Chapin students, So that's why it's very dependent, to your point, Mr. Scully, very dependent on what happens, because there is no flexibility. The structure, we can still do the structure, but who goes where in the structure does definitely change. And so what we have, Dr. Harris has provided as an opportunity. Dr. Harris, if you'd like to explain what people in the community can do to see how this impacts them.
Absolutely. So we've been very fortunate in working pretty diligently over the course of time to ensure that our families have an opportunity to kind of see ahead of time where their student might be enrolled. And so I think we've taken opportunity to mention, even during community groups, that particularly at the workshop on April 11th, I believe it was, we shared with them at that particular time that they could actually type in their address, and that could determine or predetermine whether the bond passes or whether it does not. It really gives them a visual up front as to where their student would attend, elementary, middle school, and or high school. And I think that's a great feature that gives families a heads up before anything actually happens, kind of and answers the question before any decisions are being made. So we appreciate that. It did take us a bit of time to get it done because there was a lot of plotting that had to take place. And we've even continued to kind of make certain that we have cleaned it up in its purest form, and I think we're there now. But it has taken quite a bit of time, and I know that the community has been anxious about it, but it is available, readily available, and based on my emails, I think we're using it quite well, so we're glad about that. But it does give that feature, and it kind of preloads it before any decisions are actually been made, and we're appreciative of the fact that that's available to our community.
Thank you, sir. And so as you see, with either option we have, with the referendum or without the referendum, the additional funds that are required per $150,000 is zero to fund this, and the debt service tax rate is 69.5 mils. We have our interim chief financial officer, Ms. Marty Rolls, here. If there are any questions about how this is able to be accomplished, I know more districts are using the bond referendum without a tax increase option. And so we know that this is on debt service millage. We can't go over our total 8% capacity, but we have been showing in this model from our financial advisor how we can, again, levy the $240 million without increasing the tax rate. If there are any questions for Ms. Rawls.
Any questions for Ms. Rawls? All right.
So with that, we have those options there that shows what we can do with the funds. Again, in the no referendum, fail referendum, we would just be limited to the outstanding 8% debt capacity, which I think we have used about 95% of that, and our $15 million annual maintenance. And so we asked those who were in attendance of the meeting, which options before the Board of Trustees do you prefer? Option A, with the referendum, option B, without the referendum, and 94% of the attendees said bond referendum with no tax rate increase, 6% said no bond referendum. And so we continue to take questions and feedback. All of the questions and our responses are going to be placed on our website tomorrow, and you would be able to see the answers to all the questions that came in for that forum. And so this brings us to...
Dr. Ross, can I
I'm
ask
sorry.
us, before we move on past the projects, can I ask a couple of questions that we have? One is about the business incubator at Irmo High School, and that it's expensive and appears to be based primarily on retail businesses. And the construction program also looks expensive. Have we looked at what jobs with extra high school training have the greatest needs and salaries in our area, and what are those jobs? And I'm assuming the question ties into how do they play into the business incubator and the training at the construction building?
So I would, to get that specificity, I probably want to bring in Mr. Prigge, David Prigge, to answer the questions. Just at a global 30,000 view, he looks at not only interest from the students, but his advisories. And what are your advisories sharing with you about what we need in the workplace? Whether they're, we're seeing shortages in a lot of industries, but one of the industries that we have healthcare, we have technology, we have IT, we have municipality services like police and fire, but the construction area is a deficit of ours. In terms of the business incubator, it has come from, yes, it can look like a lot of retail, but it's really about small business development. And this is based on a model where I've seen where a high poverty school has actually had super high achievement for its students in poverty by providing job creators to its community versus job seekers. But we can get some pipeline flow data for you.
I think that data would be interesting or helpful, but also kind of going back to the top of that question that was asked, the fact that those programs may be expensive. When we're looking, I think we've asked this at board meetings before. I mean, what does that look like? I mean, who would fund those programs? Do we have special grants that are funding those programs? How will that impact our annual budget? I mean, like what, so if we build, if we go forward with those two projects, I think that it would be great for our students, but the maintenance, how do we make them run?
How do you maintain them? Yes, yes, man, that's a a great question. Part of it is looking at our current operational funding and is seeing what do we have to, what do we use to retool? And every few years, I think we need to do that in terms of the offerings that we have. We've seen it, sometimes we're forced to do it, where our computer classes changed over time. There was a time where we were forced to get rid of typing, you know, because that was just no longer the piece. So you don't continue everything on, you just rotate towards the certifications that you need. We're seeing now, like in world language, that French is not as offered as many sections as we used to have 10 years ago. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to increase the operations. It does mean that we have to make sure we're targeting and hiring towards the new certifications that we need. And Kate provides us a lot of that flexibility. Another thing that I would point to specifically at Irmo High School, if you look at the programs that we currently offer there, whether it's the IB program, IB Escalores, the careers program. A lot of those are high academic qualifiers that serve that 85th percentile and above. What's there for those students that are in the struggling area? And so part of that is to provide a program that doesn't, that we have, there's no space for. So I think that with investments in this, we would need less intervention investments like Nest and things of that nature. So, but to that, I don't want to sit here and say there's no increase to the operations. That's not fair. But I do think we have the opportunity to retool some of our teaching offerings. All of these, Madam Chair, to your point, are electives. And with the elective budget, we are, if they don't make, we don't offer those.
I had a couple questions, Dr. Ross. Looking back at the Irmo High School, the conceptual drawing, was there ever any discussion with placing the cafeteria where the softball field is, which is a more accessible location, and then just sort of swapping those?
Moving those two. I don't know if we had that, Mr. Wiseman.
I'm just thinking about the kids that are in the small business incubator or the gym.
Getting closer to that.
They're getting to the cafeteria, they gotta go through a maze.
So one of those pieces by the lion's share of the program that we have for the new wing is going to be in that new wing. So all of your academic core classes are in that new wing. When we were conceptualizing the student center and cafeteria, it is actually designed for an addition where you would move right into the cafeteria. So that would have the lion's share, the majority of the students. The small business incubator is that's the elective that's on the other end. But it's a long haul.
It is a haul.
We felt that it would be better to have that there where you would move 90% of your students closer to the cafeteria than having 90% of your students or 95% of your students going all the way across the campus to the old cafeteria.
And another question I had is the Kate Center, as it stands. I know Ms. Sines alluded to the new construction wing for teaching students about construction. What are our numbers right now at the Kate Center? And the reason I ask that is if it attracts a large number of students, and I don't know what our enrollment is right now, but let's say that we do something super at the Kate Center and it attracts a large number of students, would they be filling up those extra classrooms at Spring Hill? And do they take their English, Math, and Sciences right now at Spring Hill High School? Because it's by proximity, they're right there.
Great question. So I don't know the capacity, and I can have Ms. McCaskill get that from Mr. Prigge. However, while Spring Hill uses the Kate Center for a large number of its electives, the other three high schools do not. So remember when you were principal, we had some students would go down to Irmo for auto body or something, but their academic courses were back at your high school. So that's the model now. They spend 2 blocks, and so we run a shuttle. One shuttle takes them over there in the morning. 1A and 2A, or 5B and 6B, they would be at the center.
Right.
And so if that number explodes or grows, it does not take Spring Hill space to serve them. They would be shuttled back to their home school, Irmo, Dutch Fork, and Chapin, for their academic classes.
Okay. One more question. On your colored-coded chart, where you show the priorities and the schools that have the greatest needs, I'm getting a lot of discussion about the indoor practice facility. And for some folks, they've already told me it's a deal breaker for them. Are there projects? I know we've got a lot of issues in our district because it's really growing pretty old. Are we eliminating anything, or is there something we're not giving 100% to in order to stay within the $240 million referendum so we can include the practice facility? I know I look at it and it's a beautiful thing, and I know we get a lot of use from it, but there's probably a reason no other school in South Carolina has one, and there's a lot of other districts that have a lot more money than we do. I mean, one person pointed out to me that we've had swim teams for years and years, but we don't have a swimming pool for them to practice. And I guess I never thought about that until they brought it up. We rely on Murraywood and Quail Valley and those places. But is there anything on the chart that MPS study presented to us that we are doing okay with, but we probably could? In other words, you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't want to, I hate to give a school like Harbison West a minimum so that we can get something that some other folks are sort of questioning, if that makes sense.
That makes great sense, and I think one of the things that I want to, Marta, I hate to put you on the spot, but if you look at the past referendum slide under finance, one of the things that we probably can add, Marty, is the plus 8% debt capacity to that. Because if you can explain, when we use referendum debt, what happens to our 8% capacity to allow a board to have more flexibility in order to do other projects? And I am putting you on the spot on that. I'm sorry.
When we pass the referendum,
Yeah, hit the mic there.
when we pass the referendum, it does not negatively affect the 8%. So we will still be able to issue 8% debt up to the limit of the 69.5 that the millage rate will cover. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, but I know that the previous board meeting, we talked about a myriad of projects, and they just keep coming.
And so what I didn't want to do is, if we look at MPS, and I had a document, what was the total number that they had quoted us in?
For
100 and something million, or you're looking at 101 million for the
That was just ones and twos.
ones and twos?
So if you look at ones, twos, threes, fours, and fives,
all fives are okay.
okay, 1 through 4. I guess what I'm getting at, Mr. Satterfield, is that I don't want to ever communicate that 240 was going to fix all of our problems. And that what we could do with that, and these are estimates, and we're going to talk about priority. If we get to a space and we have knocked out our priorities and there's no funds for a pavilion, then we're not going to be able to execute it. What I don't want to do is put so much in here of critical need that we get to a space and there's no financing plan for it. We try to create contingency here. We try to create an opportunity, but if you're in construction, when our estimators are telling us you got 30 days on these estimates, And so you have to prepare for, you know,
Right.
if you
Well,
don't
I
have
can
it.
tell you, my experience thus far with this, and I don't want to say that I'm not the guy that thinks that's a good idea, but my experience thus far is not too many people know about the needs at Harbison West or the needs at some of our other schools, but they sure have heard about the indoor practice facility. So that is
So is
making
it
its rounds.
are those indoor practice facilities worth our entire bond conversation? Like, is it worth, like, what, talk about priority, like, how important is that to this bond referendum if it's gonna be a deal breaker or not? Because I've heard a lot of people as well, they'll come up and be like, y'all are trying to get like indoor practice facilities for your football team.
And I understand.
And so when we're talking about getting a question ready and a document ready to put before the voters, I just want to make sure that we're being responsible with that. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about a referendum question that we're going to put in front of voters to determine whether or not they support it or not. So we're trying to make sure we have,
And that's why I wanted to bring the athletic trainers here. If after hearing what they said, they say, that's too much, then that's fair. But I wanted to, for us to hear that. I think the last time we went through this, we had stadium upgrades of press boxes. And the deal was, if you can complete this under budget, then you can build those. What typically happens, if you promise this up to 240, and we're over budget on a project, then we can't deliver something. Are we gonna put a critical need as something that we can't deliver? Having those in there is the buffer. So now, nothing critical gets missed because you have this buffer. If we go over, we can say, hey, listen, we're not gonna do these covered pavilions. But if you promise critical need up to 240, and we're over budget on a project, then we have to find another way to address critical need.
and I think that's kind of the conversation we had at our last board meeting when we were talking about whether or not to prioritize or how do you prioritize, and then that conversation kind of went off the rails a little bit about how any board could change it, but I mean, I think that we should definitely be upfront with what the intent of the question that we're putting before the
agree.
voters of what will get done as the money comes in.
Amen, yes, ma'am.
Ms.
Yeah, and kind of to Mr. Satterfield's point, the priorities, like we're getting ready to talk about, but like you just said, I mean, we did go from a press box conversation to massive enclosed practice facilities. Now we're on to a covered pavilion. Is there gonna be another change in between now and then that the voters need to worry about? Or, I mean, not worry about, but to know what's gonna be on there? Are we stuck with that? And then again, the priority of it, not saying it's not a great idea, and the backup with the athletic people and the temperature and stuff like that is a valid concern. But to Mr. Satterfield's point, I mean, was there anything else looked at other than the press box practice facility / pavilion idea? Were there any other projects that were looked at? Because I didn't hear an answer to that question, really.
Press box, that wasn't part of this.
Well, no,
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying.
So, I mean, there are, in terms of whether there are any projects looked at, I don't know if we've had, this is 2.5 years of doing this, so there was a lot of projects looked at. We looked at a bus depot. We looked at maintenance, a new maintenance shed. We've looked at, there was a lot of projects. What our goal was when you start putting these critical need pieces on there, can you deliver them? And we're gonna talk about prioritization now, next. But there were a range of different projects looked at. I added this really out of a safety issue. Maybe emotionally of some things I went through in this district, but that's what elevated it for me. I know it's not coming off of that. It comes off as an indoor practice facility, and I take full responsibility for that. But I do think, in terms of the heat illness issues, that's why it made it on the list for me.
Mr. Scully?
Yeah, and to your credit and to the athletic directors, I walked into the room being opposed to it, being part of the referendum for the reasons discussed. Optics, to me, the alternative of the referendum not passing is just not sustainable. So the importance of it passing is so critical that I just want to make sure that we give it the best chance to pass. And I questioned whether the practice facilities did that. However, I will say, coming in that way after hearing them, I have changed my opinion on that, and I do see the value. And so I'm okay, but I can understand, again, to my question earlier was, we had that time and that conversation available. The voters won't. This is the conversation that's taking place in the public, and that's unfortunately what we're up against. So we really need to be very strategic in how you target that in terms of your educational materials on the referendum. And then just a quick point to what the athletic director said. We will still, even if we had those, choose to measure the wet bulb temperature daily, right? For the benefit of the lawyers looking.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Hogan?
Dr. Ross, early in this presentation, I think the first topic you covered was campus improvements. And with, vestibules and cameras being prioritized on that list, and Dutch Fork Elementary School in there, Nursery Road, Harbison West, and closing those pods, in the event this doesn't, the referendum doesn't pass. Might be a Ms. Ross question, but at what % does our 8% money open up to where we can afford to start knocking some of these safety and security measures off sooner than later?
I think there would be some room. I think you're gonna look maybe 2 years from now. When you look at the bar chart, you can clearly see where everything is. And with the referendum, the only way that this worked is that they were front-loading it with lower principal payments, and in the future, the payments got larger. So I don't know that in the immediate future you would see a lot of room, but you can see, the colors, the darker colors as it gets up is in that 27, 28 time period. So I still think you're a few years from opening up for additional borrowing.
Okay, and I think within those same 2 years, I believe Lexington and Richland County are going to be assessing, correct?
As far-
Reevaluating property values. And so
Roll-
with that, they would be reevaluating our property as well.
Correct.
Therefore,
Rollback will happen in not this tax season, but the bills that go out this fall for the next season.
correct, okay.
Yes.
And at that point, I guess theoretically, we'll have more property value, therefore our 8% capacity would theoretically increase, correct?
Potentially.
Okay.
But
And that's kind of the conversation, or the question that we're giving to the voters about whether or not to support this now or coming later. I'm just,
Yeah, no, I mean, Nursery Road and Harbison West as an example, that's been a topic of conversation my entire 3.5 years. And it's been, on the forefront, it's necessary. We've been told multiple times, I guess, looking at it, if this fails, we're looking at 27, potentially knocking that project out.
If we look at the estimate on that, we would have to look at the cost of doing it at that time. How much growth did we gain in terms of revenue versus what cost did? That's a crystal ball question, but we wouldn't be doing any kind of significant borrowing other than our annual maintenance for another 2 years, correct?
And that's the point I wanted to bring up also. If you use the 15 million to do Harbison West and Nursery Road, you wipe out your deferred maintenance and your preventative maintenance budget from using that money completely.
Correct.
So, that's a factor, because all you're doing is postponing having to do that then. So, it's not a win in that respect, in my opinion.
And topic for conversation, is 15 million enough? I mean, I know we went from 10 million to 15.
That's a different board meeting, Matt.
Okay.
Different board meeting.
At this time, I
I'm
wanna
reining
thank
it
you,
in.
Vice Chair.
I'm using, hey, hold on one second. I saw Ms. Snipes had a question, and I'll come to you. Ms. Snipes, did you have a question?
Well, I didn't really have a question, more so I was gonna make a comment similar, sorry. I was just gonna make a comment after Kevin's, comment, because I had a similar thought. I didn't come in, opposed to the pavilion. I was kind of indifferent. I'm not a sports person. I kind of figured, well, if they say this, we need this, then, okay. But I will say, after having the athletic folks come in just to kind of explain it, I kind of look at it as safety assistance as I think about practice during harsh times, especially in the summer when it's really hot here. And I mean, it's not lost on us that, sports, they come with risk. And so I think that's something to take into consideration too, just as we, look at these things and talk about, what are priorities and that sort of thing. And I thought it was important just to kind of share that thought about the pavilions out loud as well, just so we have other perspectives around that piece.
Mr. Satterfield?
Ms. Rawls, could you help me understand? I was reading today about this proposed legislation or this new legislation that's going to correlate school funding with your fund balance, how much money you have in fund balance. Can you give me a synopsis of that or a summary?
I'm not sure that I have looked at some of the legislation. I've not studied it extensively. I can tell you the legislators are very interested in how much the fund balances are across the state. We are in the range of normal with our board policy, limiting it to that 16 to 18%. That is what is expected. It gives us about 2 months' worth of reserves to make it through the time as we wait on tax payments to come in the January, February timeframe. So, I don't know that it affects us as much as it does districts that may have 25, 30, 50% fund balances. I think that's a little bit different.
Well, I think part of what I was reading said that some schools or districts were going to receive less funding if their fund balance was too high, was excessive.
I don't think that would happen this cycle. I have not heard that in my
It may just be
understanding.
a proposal. I was just curious if you were aware of that. You could help me there. Thank you.
All right, we got derailed again, so we're going back straight.
Thank you. Appreciate kind of going over the finances of that, and we'll post tomorrow or by the end of this week, thank you, what the responses to those questions are. We asked how our community wanted to receive the updates, and you can see the majority was through the email. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about which would help, in my opinion, discuss the prioritization is construction timeline considerations. And so the board asked us, Ross, how do you prioritize doing these projects? The driver are the timeline considerations. So our objective is to complete the rezoning by August 26, 27. We need to be in position. So at minimum, wings at Chapin Elementary School and Lake Murray Elementary School, the new Dutch Fork, and the Rich Lex building. All of those have to be in the place because to make the plan work. To make the plan work, those 4 projects have to be at the top of the list. We do not get $240 million all at one time. We issue it, as you saw in the chart, you have to issue it over time. So we may get 80 million in the first one, so that has to time up perfectly, having the funds, having the prioritization, and then also considering that solicitation and architectural and of the A&E team. That's 3 months right there. Completion of design and construction documents, going from conceptual to CDs. That's about 9 months. And then to actually build the facility, boots on the ground, building the facility, that's 18 months. So that's 30 months if we started the day after the election. We missed 26, 27. That's not enough time. Part of our consideration of bringing this promise to the community is to see if we can advance time before that. Now, 18 months, we say, Alan, that's moving. Yeah. So our goal is to, if this is passed, to move into the construction phase as close to November as possible. We kind of call 0 hour February 2025. If you're not building by February 2025, we cannot make this plan work in 2026, 27. There are things that we could do in advance of the question, and that's a serious thing that we want this body to think about. We could do A&E solicitations. We can do construction documents before the question. If it fails, we have those for future reference. But if it passes, we can move to solicitation of a general contractor and be ready to meet that February 2025 date. So in terms of, this is the general election, we have to be building here to be able to enter at this point. If we wait till the election to start the 3 months of solicitation, 9 months of planning and design, and then 18 months of we've missed that date. So part of our consideration as we talk about the priority of projects is we've had a timeline that really takes us to being able to execute a solicitation of A&E services for moving to CD or construction documents in advance of the question, in advance of the election. And if the board makes the decision on May 20th, that allows us to start that 12-month program so that we're in position to execute should there be a past referendum. So as we see it, the priority of projects are in the order to which we have listed. In terms of what do we do with that first 80 million that we receive. We can't all get the 240 at the beginning. So we have to get this in, Marty, is it 3 different tranches? And that's the limit. We can't create more. Right?
It's 80,000 3 times. I mean, 80 million 3 times, yes.
So with that first 80 million, we would issue those in 3 consecutive years, correct? And so our priority on that first 80 would be, I have the first 7 projects listed. Security, New Dutch Fork Elementary, the Rich Lex, the renovations for the 2 rated facilities, the wings at Harbison West, enclosing walls at Harbison West and Nursery Road, and the wings of Chapin Elementary and Lake Murray Elementary. In terms of least prioritized is the covered practice pavilions and the Fine Arts Center. And then in terms of the instructional programs, it's the Small Business Incubator and the administrative building, professional development building followed by the construction lab. So this is the priority of projects as which we see it. We would need assistance, though, in phasing this. The phasing would depend on the movement, the facilities, the movement and construction, timeline, ordering materials, all the procurement-related items. We can't house that within our current operations, so we would need assistance with that. But this, in terms of priority, is how we have it listed.
So you don't foresee this list of projects and the list that, the order, the prioritization, you don't foresee that changing again?
No, ma'am.
You're not gonna bring another list before the board before,
Yes, ma'am. So our plan was to get as much feedback by April 22nd, so that April 22nd, May 6th, and May 20th, you see the same plan.
that's good for me. Anyone have any questions for Dr. Ross at this point? Mr. Scully?
Just comment. Actually, and a question. Last time I'll talk about it. On the pavilions, any chance in future paperwork and on the question, we can rename that as covered outdoor pavilions or something? And then, do those include, those costs, the 13.8? Does that include or consider plumbing and water access?
That's just the fields.
Because you're gonna need restrooms and, water there, right?
You don't necessarily have restrooms at every field, do you?
Well, it depends on, I'm just thinking of how set off they are from other,
They are, okay.
I think the only one that right now doesn't have water access is it Dutch Fork? Please don't hold me to it. Let's get that researched out.
because that'll also kind of limit the multiple use aspect of it. Like if you're talking about having, maybe you're not, graduations there, well, you're gonna need restrooms there.
That's
you know,
correct.
And so, that's all. It just question, but I'm done with that topic today.
No, we appreciate that. To the notion of it's covered shade of the existing field, so it's a accessory to our current field, but we know it's a huge accessory, a huge addition to that. That's correct. And we will have, as we discuss the question, because we use our attorney, Franny Hauser, to help us develop the question. We've asked certain things like, could we put in the question, and if there was enough money left, they could do and I think we couldn't do that, right? Yes, we could not put a conditional, but that was my question, that at the bottom, and if there's money left over, allow them to do this, but we can't do that.
Generally, if there's money left over, it is supposed to go back and redeem the bond principal. So you complete the projects, and if there are any left over, which I don't know that happens, based on inflation and cost of construction going up, we're getting as good as estimates as we can, but some of these projects that we're talking about may be 4 years from now, so who knows what's gonna happen, over time.
Mr. Satterfield and then Ms. Barnhart.
Okay. Dr. Ross, on the renovations, and reconditioning of Crossroads, Dutch Fork High, Middle, and all that, I see it says 39,950. I expressed this, I guess several months ago when we first started talking about the referendum, but I know that we had groundbreaking at Irmo High School, and I'm excited about that. I really am for Irmo High School. One of my concerns that I expressed at that time, and I think I shared this with you, but I'll do it publicly now, and that is that I don't want to put what they call lipstick on a pig, Irmo Middle School is really, you could almost tear that building down and start over. Some of these schools are just flat worn out. In Irmo High School, the new area looks bright and beautiful. But I really I really am interested in making sure that these schools that are getting these renovations and these reconditionings are not just being brought up to code, so to speak. You know, I really would like them to be a school where these students are just, and the faculty is just so proud to be there, and they want to take ownership in those schools. And, you know, every kid deserves a great school to be at, you know, so. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that
I
out.
agree with you. I just think that we're just kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place because, I mean, if you look at one of the first studies I saw when I first got on the board, a lot of these projects that we have on here right now that are renovations, a lot of those schools, I mean, they've been called to like completely rebuild them, like multiple schools in our district. We just can't rebuild every school. So it's kind of like you have to just, you know, decide what you can do with what you have.
And
So, I mean, if we wanted to completely rebuild all of those schools, I mean, our bond referendum would have to be so much higher, and that would raise taxes. And honestly, I don't think that that would pass.
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting that we do that. I'm just saying that I would just love for those schools not to just get a new coat of paint and power washing. Yeah, lipstick on a pig, as they say. I would like to see them, back when Mr. Hogan was at Irmo High School, it was one of the, you know, the finest institutions in our state, and students were very proud, and that was a long time ago, I understand, Mr. Hogan, but the point being is, students in a facility, I can tell you from being in schools for so long, kids love to take ownership in their schools.
Right.
And if you put them in a beautiful facility, not just okay or standard or whatever you might want to call it, the renovations at Chapin High School are beautiful. It's a beautiful school to walk through. Anyway, that's just my point. I just want to make sure that these renovations and the money that we're putting forth toward those, and I mentioned that earlier. I hope that we're not compromising anything in order to try to meet some of the things that might be seen as a little extra. That's all. Thank you.
Ms. Barnhart, I know you had a question.
Yeah, one more on the comment on the practice facility. I think we should call them practice facilities. I mean, they're going to be for football and soccer and lacrosse practice, so I don't think changing the name of it is going to make any difference in how people choose to vote or not vote on it. But on the contractor, the idea of if, I don't know if we can go back to that timeline, calendar. You said that February would kind of be that marker to where things need to be moving. And so if we could have the contractors and everybody kind of in line by then, and if it does pass, and then would there be things in the contracts or discussions with these people so that they know this work is only conditional based off of if the bond referendum passes? Just, okay.
Excellent point. And that's one of the things that we wanted to start tonight, because if on May 20th you make the decision to move forward, we want to have that discussion of, okay, what can we do in advance and not wait till November? And so, yes, one of the things in terms of our solicitation is part of our requirements. That we have to be ready based on our plan to do this. So not just one GC, it may be three. One working in the Chapin area, one working in the Irmo area, one working in the Dutch Fork area. Ms. Rawls?
We would include that. So for instance, so the things that we are looking at doing ahead of time, if for some reason the referendum did not pass, we would still have ownership. If we worked on construction documents for a new Dutch Fork Elementary School, we will have something that we will take away from that. However, if we are doing the solicitation for any contractors, we would do that subject to the condition that the referendum did pass.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, yes, sir.